If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. I'm Kathryn, your host, and I'm so glad you're here today. On this podcast, my main focus is to help you stop binge eating. But I also like to bring you a variety of related topics and ideas for helping you improve your relationship with food and your body. This episode is about learning to enjoy food. And of course that means learning to enjoy food when you are not binging on it. There is a false pleasure in binge eating that only harms you and your health and your life. And when you give up the idea that binge eating is pleasurable, you can start learning what foods in what amounts give you true pleasure. To help me have this conversation, I have Steve Warwick on the show today. Steve helps make healthy food more appealing for people through food styling and cooking, and his Instagram is called Healthy Done Sexy. He's also an eating disorder survivor and a men's mental health advocate. He's going to share his own journey of recovery and how he went from a very toxic relationship with food to embracing and loving it, and how you can also learn to do this in your own unique way. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you here. Today, we're going to talk about learning to find true pleasure in food, which is something that people with eating disorders often struggle with. And before we get into that, Steve, can you just tell the audience who you are and what you currently do?
Who I am is just Steve, I suppose. What I do on Instagram is, I started off doing was just making healthy foods a bit more appetizing. So I wanted to prove wrong the belief that to be healthy, you had to just eat broccoli and chicken breast and boiled rice. So that's how it started. And then it's progressed over the years to be more artistic, creative, and creating more sexy foods, hence the name Healthy Done Sexy.
Yeah, I looked at your Instagram and all the food looks amazing. And I thought it would be a really interesting topic because a lot of people with eating disorders just really have trouble enjoying food or finding pleasure, or they think, oh, the only time I can get pleasure from food is if I'm binging or really overdoing it. So I really like how you try to make everyday food more appealing and enjoyable. And I know that wasn't always the case for you. I know that you had your own struggle with food and it's taken you a long time to get to this place. So can you share some of your own journey with an eating disorder and then recovery?
So the eating disorder, I think, kind of came from borderline personality disorder, which I was diagnosed with in my mid-teens when I was about 15. And then there was, I suppose, a social impact where if you're in certain cliques at school, you have to play certain sports and do certain things and whatnot. And there were comments made throughout school. You had to look a certain way and have a certain body. So I think if I had a normal brain at that time, I would have just carried on as a normal student would, but I think I took it to heart a lot more than I should have done. So I started obsessive exercising and I started not trying to diet, but I tried to think about what were healthy foods. And of course, back then I did think that healthy foods were the boring stuff. And back then there wasn't a massive range of diet options and healthy options. And that kind of gradually crept into me being a bit scared of food and not wanting to eat, and I would avoid eating. And the more I avoided eating, the slimmer I got, and then the more defined on some of my abs, for example. So then that made a positive connection with a really negative way of living and of thinking about food. And that carried on for a couple of years until randomly one day I decided, after it was a Subway sandwich, I had this and decided afterwards that I needed to get it out of me. And that was a really good idea to throw that up. And that was the beginning, the opening the door of the, I suppose, the bulimia tendencies.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. Just kind of getting into dieting for one reason or another, whether it's sports, whether it's thinking you need to look a certain way, and then before you know it, it's kind of taking over. From my understanding, you didn't actually binge eat. You would throw up normal meals. Is that the case?
Yeah. The time I kind of admitted to myself that I definitely had a problem was when I had it was a can of tuna. So just tuna and brine on top of a bed of I think, spinach leaves and watercress, very plain, nothing to it. I ate that, and that was hard to eat that. But because I think spinach is quite filling, and I had quite a lot of it because I thought it's only leaves, and I had that feeling of fullness. So it hit my stomach, and my stomach felt a tiny little bit bloated, and I had to go and throw that up. And it was then that I realised that I've definitely got a problem. If I can't have leaves and a tin of tuna, I've got an issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's really scary, especially because it seems like you were an active person and you needed calories and you just weren't giving yourself those. And when you did give yourself calories, you made yourself get rid of it. And I feel like that's, yeah, it just leads you down a very dangerous path.
Yeah, and when it came to binging, there were a few times when I'd kind of bottomed out. You go through highs and lows, don't you? If I was at a low and I'd spent my last pound on cheap wine and I'd kind of exhausted my last friendship and burnt the last bridge, I would probably binge then, and I'd call it a cheat day or something. And yeah, obviously that would all come up as well. But generally, binging wasn't a thing that I did. It was avoidance, and then get rid of anything that I did eat.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that had any level of pleasure. I mean, as you ate, I'm sure there was no pleasure there. There's, of course, no pleasure in vomiting. I mean, the idea of food being pleasurable probably seemed really foreign to you at that time.
Yeah, it did, and you kind of build this. I suppose it's almost an anger, or yeah, we'll go with anger to people around you that can eat the lasagna and whatnot. Because obviously, like through some of this time, I was living with my parents or ex-girlfriends, and I was able to cook for them. I still enjoy cooking. I love preparing the food, and you have this little kind of grudge that they're able to sit down and enjoy that, and I couldn't.
What helped you start making the shift to learning to set aside these problems with food and really starting to nourish yourself again?
Yeah, I just had enough. I was at the time I had a flat. I was renting the flat. I didn't have a job. I had sold my sofa, my couch, and my TV was broken. The place was a pigsty. It was awful. And I'd been on a night out, and I woke up and I had text messages from people asking what I'd done, and why I did certain things. And everything just kind of came to a head. And I said, like, this needs to improve. This can't be my life. And so I decided to start making a change. And I've said on previous podcasts, that's where I think the positive side of having borderline personality disorder came through. Because having the all or nothing mentality, I was just driven to try and make myself better.
That's amazing. I'm sure a lot of people are curious more of the specific steps you took. I mean, did you wake up one day and just decide, okay, I'm going to enjoy a normal breakfast and not throw up?
Yeah, fixed. I decided on that day to stop smoking, to stop doing drugs, and to stop drinking. So that was that. And with me, once I make up my mind on something, then that's it, which can be good and bad. But from then, I just wanted to find out how I could make myself better. And growing up, I always liked watching documentaries or nature programs or anything to do with science in the human body. So I knew that I had like a love for science and learning those things. So I went down that kind of route, and I started learning about nutrition, the human body, how muscles work, how our body digests, and that's how I started to convince myself that eating is okay, and that I need to eat, and that I need carbohydrates, and I need fats. And then it was just really, really, really small steps in the right direction. Sometimes I'd try to make a change, and it would take months, maybe a year, to kind of fully immerse myself in that change. But I knew that I was going towards it.
I really like the idea of using science to convince yourself that you need to eat. I mean, yeah, just learning about the harmful effects of restriction, of bulimia, it can really wake you up. I think that was a big thing for me as well with binging and dieting too, that I learned how harmful it is to the body. And I also learned the effects it has on the body, in that it sent my brain into this survival state that made me binge, and that the binge eating got reinforced through a natural reward system process in the brain. And it wasn't really that something was wrong with me. This was a scientific process that was going on in my more primitive brain centers, and like, oh, that's not really me. That's just what my brain does. And there's a science behind it. So, and there's also a science behind nutrition. So I really like how you brought that in to your own healing.
Yeah, I needed to go with something that I knew would work. I knew that sitting down in front of someone in therapy, and for them to say, this does this for the body, this does that for the body, and this is how nutrition works, I knew that wouldn't work for me. Mm-hmm. I needed to read about 15 to 20 sources giving me the same information, so that I could kind of say, right, so 13 of these 20 all say the same thing, so I'm going to say that's the truth. And I still do that.
That's really interesting. And especially because I feel like nutrition science can contradict itself in a lot of ways. You can read one source that says one thing, another source that says another thing, but there also are some commonalities between everyone that we can all agree on. Like, we should be eating more whole foods, natural foods, things like that. I mean, these are things that no one can really dispute.
Yeah.
You got the science, you started really nourishing your body. How was the journey with your weight and body image? I mean, I know you started to try to be a certain weight, and you got some reinforcement by maybe losing some weight or becoming more muscular. Were you able to deal with that once you started eating normally?
My weight didn't change that much, because where I wouldn't binge on food, I would binge on alcohol to just escape the reality that I was struggling in. And I didn't know back then that alcohol had lots of calories in it. So I was probably consuming a decent amount of calories over the course of a month. So when I kind of stopped that and started to bring food into my diet, I don't think there was that much of a big shift. I stayed at the same weight for a long time, but I felt better. Yeah.
And that's the most important thing, right? Like, no matter what the weight is, of course we all want to feel good in our own body, but I think people get attached to, I can't recover because it might mean I might gain weight. And most of the time that's not even the case. Like you talked about, your weight did stay stable, and everyone is different. And everyone has a different journey as far as that, but it's really learning to trust your body and really learning to nourish yourself, and then allowing your body to be where it is naturally, and trying to just be the healthiest version of yourself without trying to meet any sort of unrealistic standard.
Yeah. And so now I'm doing what's called a bulk. So I'm now purposely eating more than my body needs to gain mass. As I go to the gym, and I want to get a bigger structure. And even now, when I'm eating 10% more every day than what my body needs, it's hard to put on weight. So living through this, I mean, this took me a long time to get through this, and I've been doing it for a few weeks now. And then realizing it's not easy to put on weight, even when you want to. It's really kind of opened my eyes even more. So I'm continuously learning. I'm continuously challenging myself. And I think that's how I started, and that's how I've got better. It took me a long time, but now 13 to 15 years on, changes are coming quicker, and I'm believing the science quicker. And it's not taking me a year of documentary watching for me to understand and move forwards.
Yeah. That's really interesting about trying to put on weight, and sort of realizing that's difficult as well. And the body is just so complicated. And sometimes people try to make it overly simple. Oh, if you just get in this sort of calorie deficit, you're going to lose this amount of pounds. Or if you eat this calorie surplus, you'll gain this amount of pounds. But that's not how the body works. It's constantly trying to maintain homeostasis. So if you're eating more, it's going to try to speed up metabolism. If you're eating less, it's going to slow down metabolism. So it's just way more complex than some sort of calorie math equation.
Yeah, the body's very clever. The mind is very clever and very powerful too.
I think it's amazing too that you were able to just put aside your other addictions. I think that can give a lot of people hope too. Just that sometimes we can be told that you need, years of therapy, or you'll always be powerless against these substances, or things like that. And, that's probably a whole different conversation, and whatever works for you as far as ending addiction is great, but it's also possible to just realize that this craving is something you no longer want to follow. And you just got up and realized you weren't going to do that anymore, no matter what urges or cravings arose.
Yeah, I think one thing I talk about, one thing I tell a lot of people is no matter what your circumstance, no matter what you're addicted to, or no matter what you're doing with your body to yourself, you are in control of your mind. Because even your weaknesses, they're coming from you. You're in control of that. But it's finding that control, it's finding that power. And I'm lucky. People say I have tremendous willpower. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that if I make a decision, I stick with it, and that's that. So I think I was lucky to have that. I know that not everyone can do that. But yeah, I decided that alcohol and drugs were really not doing me any favors. So I stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It really is. And I guess I want to go back to the food for a little while. I think some people think that recovery means, okay, food can only be viewed as fuel. I can never just indulge or find pleasure in food again because I'm giving up binging. So I have to just wake up and eat my meals kind of in a robotic way. Like it's just fuel. So for you, I know that it's more than fuel. It's enjoyment. It's appealing. It's pleasurable. It's sexy, as in your Instagram name. So can you talk about how you were able to make that shift between like really learning about the science and what you need to then also being able to enjoy it?
Yeah, it wasn't quite that easy. So I was using a food diary app. I still do. But I was really, really restrictive at the start because it was like, okay, I'm going to start eating food and I'm not going to throw it up. So I had to have just immense control over it. And back then I thought carbs were the enemy. So it was, protein's fine. Carbs are awful things. So it was still very, very restrictive, but it was still a step forwards. And then like diet foods and reduced fat things started coming out, and I started using these. So my Instagram page to start off with was just these massive plates of loads of vegetables and like a few carbs and reduced fat sausages or something like that. Just so I could show people that it's more than what you think healthy is. So I was making casseroles and curries and traditional pasta dishes and whatnot. But yeah, as I progressed, I started learning more and testing my body more. And I think the more, I think I use myself as a guinea pig actually quite a lot in a weird way. But the more I've learned, the more I experience, the more things I've included in my diet. So now my motto is don't restrict, rethink. And it's a case of like, you don't have to not have certain foods. You can have them. You might need to maybe tweak a few ingredients to bring it down. So it's not just ladens and ladens and ladens of indulgence. But yeah, you can enjoy healthy food, and it certainly can be very sexy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love healthy food, and I know a lot of people I talk to love it as well. They only really want those really unhealthy binge foods when they're in that mindset of that primitive brain-driven binge state. And when they really step back and think, okay, what do I truly enjoy? It is more of the healthy food. Like, sure, they want some of those unhealthy foods sometimes as well, and that can all have a place, but really healthy food is very enjoyable.
Yeah, it really is.
And I like that you also enjoy cooking too. I feel like that's one of my downfalls is I love healthy food, but I don't like to cook. So sometimes I opt more for convenience because I feel like I don't have time to cook. And so how do you incorporate cooking into your lifestyle?
I suppose in the same way as we all brush our teeth every day. It's just part of my day. Cooking is my downtime. It's my realization time. And it's something I enjoy. So I want to incorporate that into my life. If I go out for a meal at a restaurant, I can do that now. That's quite easy now, but I miss the cooking.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. I love the example of, it's just like brushing your teeth. It's, if you want to take care of yourself, you just need to do it. It's just part of your day. It's non-negotiable. I think in our society, we can think, I have so many more important things to do, and just wanting food to be as easy as possible. But I think there is value in putting some effort there.
Yeah, but I think people kind of overcomplicate it, or they think eating healthy or just preparing a meal is going to be harder than it actually is. You can throw a decent meal together in less than half an hour, and then you'll probably eat it in half an hour. So that's an hour out of your day. And I think a lot of people say they don't have time. And what the truth is, I think, is that they do have the time, but they'd rather be spending their time that's free doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I suppose you do have to have that want to get in the kitchen and to make something. I suppose I'm lucky because I do have that.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I think when we talk about food enjoyment, a lot of times for people I work with, that is very much related to binging. And they think, oh, if I allow myself to enjoy food, I'll be out of control and I'll binge. And that's a concern that people have. So, what would you say to that as far as being kind of scared to enjoy food?
So a lot of people say to you that they enjoy the binge.
Yeah, I mean, in the moment, it's that fleeting sort of primal pleasure, and it always leads to pain. But in the moment, it feels like, oh, this is the time I get to let loose. This is the time I get to let go of all my rules and restrictions. This is when I truly get to enjoy food. And they feel like other times they're not allowing themselves to. So the idea of allowing yourself to enjoy food outside of a binge can be scary to people sometimes, because they think if I allow myself that enjoyment, I'll just keep wanting more and more and more and go on to binge.
I like the I don't know if it's a phrase that I've coined, but I say make decisions today that will make you happy tomorrow. And if a binge is on the plan today, will that make you happy tomorrow? If restricting is on plan for today, will that make you happy tomorrow? And I think it's kind of all encompassing. It's quite a vast and vague kind of expression, but it's annoying because nothing I say is ever going to get through to someone who's really suffering. Not in a sentence. I know that.
Yeah.
But I hope that sharing my story and my journey will kind of open maybe a door or put a light at the end of a tunnel, because food is to be enjoyed every day. Mm-hmm. Like you should enjoy every meal you eat. So it's just working towards that. I suppose a step at a time.
Yeah, I really like that. What you do today, you should enjoy it today and enjoy it tomorrow, or even right after. I think the binge, you enjoy it in the moment, but then it always leads to pain. And enjoying food is about enjoying it in the moment and then enjoying how it makes you feel afterward, either directly afterward, tomorrow. So I think the idea that enjoyment and self-control can go together. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. A good meal is to be kind of talked about afterwards, isn't it? And you can talk to the people you shared the meal with and say that, that steak was fantastic, or I love the way they did the veggies. And food is more than just fuel, isn't it? It's an experience. It's a bonding thing. It brings people together, and definitely that's why it should be enjoyed.
Yeah. I want to talk about just some of the details of enjoyment of food. When I look at your pictures, it seems so colorful and appealing. How do you bring in, I guess, all the senses, and how would you describe a good meal?
Wow. So the colors, when I think of a meal that I'm going to do for Insta, I think of the flavors that I want to put together. I always like a richness with an acid, and then with something maybe that's got a bit of sweetness to it. So like carrots and like a natural sweetness. And then I think about what ingredients I can use to create that kind of flavor profile, but in different colors. So peppers give you sweetness, carrots give you sweetness, onions that are cooked long enough can give you sweetness, but they all come in different colors. So I kind of just put it together in my head and then throw it down on the plate, quite literally. A good meal for me has to be balanced. I spoke to someone recently, actually. They thought that I was carb restricting because of some of my plates don't have carbs on them. But that is purely because some carbohydrates are really difficult to style. So rice is quite difficult to make look pretty on the plate. So I try and put it in there, but like in small amounts. There's always a difference between an IG plate and a real life plate, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, I like how you've just kind of made it work for you and made it your own and what you enjoy. And I think that's a good lesson for anyone listening, is that you may not exactly like what Steve likes, but you may find some different things that you like and you find amazing. And the way that food is appealing and enjoyable to one person may be totally different than it is for another person. And I think that's okay. And I think it's exciting to explore this for yourself and to experiment, and you can make it into something fun and appealing instead of something that feels so difficult and just hard.
Yeah, and there's a world of flavors out there, and across all of the cuisines around the world, there's generally common theme running through. So if you look at a chili con carne to a bolognese, they're very, very similar kind of meals, but it's just spices that are different. And the same with different North African curries to Indian curries. They can be very, very similar, just using slightly different spices or different cooking methods.
Yeah, and that's something that kind of came to my mind right now is some people I work with also have different like food sensitivities or different health issues that require them to eat in a certain way. And they think, oh, it's not enough variety. I feel so restricted because I can't have these foods. Well, if you focus on what you can have and how you can cook it in different ways and how you can spice it in different ways, you can actually add variety in your life if you have actual health restrictions as far as what you can eat.
I know, I met someone from Instagram and she's got 3 kids, and between her and her 3 kids, they're pretty much allergic to everything. So obviously her cooking and maintaining the kids' healthy diets was extremely, extremely difficult, but she manages it. And so many things she has to eliminate, but she manages to put a healthy meal on the table for them. So it might seem difficult, but it's not impossible. It's not rocket science. It's just getting your head around it, isn't it?
Yeah, all this has been really helpful. As sort of a final thought, what would you say to someone who right now is really in that struggle and feels like they're so far away from being in a place where they're truly enjoying food? How would you tell them to get started in this process?
Find one thing that you know to be true that will make your life better, and hold on to that and learn from that. The same way I did science. There will be something that you know is true and that you can believe and that you can run with. And I think it's making tiny, tiny steps positively forwards. It's got to be the only way to get better.
Thank you so much. I think that's so helpful. I think you're definitely an inspiration to come from a place where, you're having a meal and throwing it up, and to a place now that you're making these beautiful, healthy meals that on display for people to see and that you're nourishing yourself with and helping other people nourish themselves. I think it's just it's a testament to where you can get to. Eating disorder can feel like such a dark place, but I feel like you're definitely a light and an example of what's possible.
Thank you.
And where can people learn more about you?
They can go on Instagram and look for healthy.done.sexy, and you'll see me there with a big cheesy grin and loads of food splatters on plates.
Yeah, and I'll include that link in the show description as well. Thank you so much for being here, Steve.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I hope you got a lot out of that conversation. It was a very unique episode, and I really enjoyed it. And I hope you can start to come up with your own ways to make food more appealing. When you go to Steve's Instagram for ideas and inspiration, remember what he said about there being a difference between a styled plate for Instagram and an actual plate that you're eating. Your actual portion sizes and food composition will be unique to you. And for a meal, this will typically be more than what's on a styled plate. If you're still struggling with binge eating, we have several resources to guide you, including my free ebook, The Brain Over Binge Basics, my 2 books on Amazon and Audible, which are Brain Over Binge and The Brain Over Binge Recovery Guide, my online course, group coaching, and one-on-one coaching. And you can find those links in the show description as well, or just go to brainoverbinge.com to learn more. I appreciate you being here for today's show. And until next time, I want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the host of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.